Good morning, everyone. Happy Monday. Here we are again on our Back to Basics Practice Management, another session, another Monday. This Monday, I'm excited about this topic. We are going to be talking about succession planning. So, our guest, I'm thrilled to have him as our guest today, and that's going to be John Sherman. I'm going to talk a little bit about, how who John Sherman is, and we'll get to our chat. So John is a proud Villanova alumnus and has had a diverse financial services career. He began in foreign exchange in New York and ventured to Tokyo and Singapore. His journey led him back to the Philadelphia area and a transition to institutional asset management. John developed a strong desire to make a difference in people's lives, but realized the institutional market was not the place where he could have the strongest impact. He works with individuals and families around financial planning, and his business has a particular emphasis on helping business owners on the single most important financial decision they will ever have to make: how to leave their business in style. So, we'll be talking more about that. John is a business owner himself and understands the challenges that present themselves derived from owning a business. His educational background includes a certified exit planner designation and chartered financial analyst. Charter holder. He holds an undergraduate degree in accounting from Villanova University and an MBA from New York University. John maintains a FINRA Series 7 and 63 securities registrations and holds licenses in life and health insurance. So without further ado, we're going to dig into this topic of succession planning. Hey, John.
Morning. How you doing?
Good. How are you?
Oh, happy Monday to everybody.
Happy Monday. Glad we have another round of Monday. All right. So let's dig into our topic. Define what is succession planning. Like, what is that exactly for our audience?
Yeah, so I typically like to use analogies as a way to think about it. So imagine you're sitting on an airplane returning home from a vacation. Now I know if you're a physician or a business owner in general, vacation may sound like an oxymoron. But humble me for a moment here. You're on the plane. You've actually been on vacation. You managed to get away. You could put your cell phone down. You actually got a couple hours where you actually really had a good time. You could really step away from the business, right? But now you're sitting on the plane. You're flying home. You're that knot starting to come back in your stomach. You know what's happened since I've been gone. You start to the stress level starts to go up again. So think of this airplane. Think of what's the most important thing at that moment in time that you should be concerned about sitting on that airplane. And typically, when I ask this, I get all kinds of questions. Is there a scotch available, or something like that. But think of it this way: takeoff is optional, landing is mandatory. So the plane is the analogy for your business. You made a decision 20 years ago, 5 years ago, whenever that was, to get on that plane, right? To launch this business. And you probably didn't realize the failure rates were very high, which is probably a good thing. But you're sitting here today, you're on the plane, the business is where it's at, doing what it's doing. But now you got to land the plane. So succession/exit planning is all about landing the plane. You may be, several hours out from landing the plane, so to speak, or you may be circling over the airport. But at the end of the day, remember that succession planning means different. It's a very personal decision. It means different things to different people. On the one hand, you could, sort of wash your hands and literally leave. But other times, owners want to still be involved in a business, just have a different kind of role. End of the day, what I tell people is, think of it as it's the inevitable day that we can help you plan for, so you can do it as you allude to, in style, when you want, for the money you need, to the people you know and trust.
So I like that analogy of the plane. I think we can all relate to that. And with independent physician practices as well as small business owners. And I think this topic is one of those things that is going to translate across, which is the beauty about this actual topic. So fast forward to my second question. So, when should succession planning become part of the business, right? As an operation strategy. So we have two ends of the spectrum. You're brand new, physician practice just opened their practice. They decided to go at it on their own, and then you have one that's already been existing. We've been practicing for a while. We have years under our belt. Again, similar descriptor to a small business owner that just started and has long existence as a business owner. So when should that be? And let's just continue with your airplane analogy. The booking of the ticket, and then when is that? When do I book that ticket for that plane ride that I'm going, where I have no phones and whatnot and what have you?
Yeah, you don't want the flight to be canceled too. So
exactly.
Which as I'll get into, there can be circumstances. So when should you start planning for this? The short answer is yesterday. And the reason why I say that, so typically if it's a startup organization, right, it revolves around value. So if the business has value, right, for physicians, obviously starting out from scratch, there may not be a lot of value yet. There could be a lot of debt, right, with the equipment and all those kinds of things that are needed. But it really revolves around value. Once the business is worth something, it's really important to have aspects of that journey in place. The way to think about it, three broad areas to think about, because this succession planning is a multi-year process. This isn't something that happens typically. I've had it. I want to get out. That's one door you can walk through. There's actually three doors you can go through if you own a business. You can flip the sign from open to close. You can sell it or a succession strategy to an insider. So your partner or partners, family members, employees. The advantage to doing that is that if legacy is important to you, you're staying in the community, you've built this practice, this business from scratch. It's your name, it's your reputation. You care about what happens to your employees, that sort of thing. You have a lot more influence and control over that. The downside is those folks typically don't have the money to pay you today. The third door you can walk through is selling it to a third party, right? Again, that third party for physicians could be a hospital organization. I know a lot of that's going on, has been for a while, but the good news is you get a check, so to speak. So financially they hand you, but if you're concerned about what happens to your employees, your legacy, et cetera, you don't have as much influence over that. So there's no right or wrong answer. It really comes down to, what do the owner or owners, what do they want? What do they want to accomplish? And the way to kind of frame this journey, which again can be many years, some aspects of it, is protect, grow, and exit. So protection is typically what should happen yesterday. So I'll make up numbers just for example's sake. Let's say the practice, the business is worth $5 million. What happens to the value of that business if certain events would happen? The easiest one to think of is the knee jerk is, unfortunately, the owner dies or a partner dies. A partner once it comes in and says, I want to retire. How is that handled? What if a partner says, I'm going through a divorce? How is that going to be handled? All from the business perspective. A lot of times businesses will have loans, right? Physicians typically have some debt because they need equipment and those kinds of things. So if you read the fine print of the loans, sometimes it'll say, if an owner passes, the loan's callable immediately. do you have the money sitting around to pay that off?
Mm.
Another way to think about the protection is disability. So healthcare professionals can relate to this very, very easily because they see it in the line of work they're in. But what would happen if you became disabled? Not forever, which certainly would be bad, but what would happen if you couldn't work for, a couple years because you were in a car accident? So there's all kinds of events, some that are unpredictable, some that, like a retirement, you can think about, but protect the value of the business, because if some of those events happen, your
Mhm.
employees may leave. If the owner passes away or becomes disabled, are you going to have capital to keep the lights on, so to speak, pay the bills, make payroll, those kind of things. So that's one aspect, protection. Um, the next aspect, and these aren't necessarily linear, some of these things can happen simultaneously, but the other aspect is the business. You want the practice to be worth more in the future than it is today, right? Because for
Right.
most people, this business value is your nest egg. That's why you're doing this. One of the reasons why. So I can't tell you to come in and how to do surgery, of course, or how to make a widget or become operationally more efficient. But what we help owners with is thinking about retaining employees, key employees. So think of it as, if you get an owner behind a closed door, they will tell you there are some employees that if they left, my practice would fail, or it'd be really hard to find somebody to replace them. It may take me a while. And then I've got another employees that, I wish they would leave, and everything in between. So two kind of spaces. One is called the qualified side.
Mhm.
That's what you think of 401ks and all those kind of things. Valuable, beneficial to employees, but from an owner's perspective, it'll sound a little harsh, but you can't discriminate in the sense that every employee has a different value to the business. Some are more valuable than others. But on the qualified side, Uncle Sam makes all the rules. So you have to treat everybody exactly the same, whether they're your office manager that if he or she left, you'd be in trouble, right? Uh,
Right.
so part of this is to set up a program on what's called the non-qualified side, where it's literally, think of it as a blank piece of paper, meaning the owner makes the rules. So, we work with owners to help them understand this and to put a program in place. And again, I'll just, use some examples of just, I've got Susie who runs the office, right? Obviously
Right.
the office has to run. What am I doing to retain her? What am I doing to make sure she doesn't leave? So you can put a program in place for her, and then at the same time, maybe there's another employee who is just as valuable, but has a different responsibility for the business. Um, how do I retain them? So you can create a program so that you can incentivize them to do what they're supposed to do for your business. And you can say, if you do these things in 5 years, you'll get a bonus of X, right? If you leave,
Mhm.
that sort of thing. That's one
Right.
aspect. The other aspect would be, sometimes those folks may want to become owners of the business. Now, for physicians, obviously there's obviously a skill level there if you're a physician or a dentist, or so everybody's different.
Mhm.
May the owners in that practice may be all, dentists or physicians or whatever, but everybody's different. Sometimes, you know, the person who runs the office, that sort of thing, it's up to the owner. But think of it as a way to try and create a market to sell your business to. So again, just to use a simple example, if Joe, if you're very valuable to the business, I know you want to assume more responsibility. You'd like to become an owner, or
Mhm.
maybe take it over, or maybe own a portion of the business. So if you do, A, B, and C, if you do these things over the next 5 years, you'll have the opportunity to buy 30%, 51%, everything, whatever you want it to be, based on a valuation formula we agreed to today, right? Because 5 years from now, 10 years from now, you want the business to be worth more. So in effect, what you're doing is you're able to give pseudo ownership to somebody without giving up any control today. Because what people don't always realize is as soon as you start giving equity to somebody, it'll sound a little harsh, but if that person would happen to pass away, their interest would go to their estate, and now you could be in business with their spouse. Point being, you can create a lot of complexity where it's not really needed. You can do it. You can accomplish the same thing without all the complexity. The third aspect is the actual exit. So, again, this may be something that you haven't really thought about very much. You honestly don't know what that's going to look like because it's so far off in the future, and you're trying to put out fires and take care of your patients and make widgets and whatever it is you do. So protect, grow, and exit, that's sort of the way to frame it. In my opinion, the protection side is something that should happen yesterday. These other aspects, you should be aware of it, but you don't necessarily have to do something about that today. One other point is just so all of these things that I've outlined here are typically governed by what's referred to as a buy-sell agreement. So a buy-sell agreement is a legal document, and just think of it as like a business will. So much like you have a will on the personal side, the buy-sell agreement in very detailed fashion lays out what happens to my practice, what happens to my business if these events happen. And again, the events can be unexpected, disability, it could be retirement, it could be divorce, etc. So, that's maybe. I think I've kind of covered the big points there. So
yeah, I like the protection, grow, and exit, and the protection. I've heard that I think twice now in my topic. In the last session also I had was protection also. So we know that that's something that you have to make sure you enact upon as business owners across the board. Secondly, in the growth, and a physician practice can be myriad of size and scope. They're not in the same. And as you said, based on what that would be, you're going to mitigate what your desire or whom that you're in partners with. So and then there's the actual true exit. With all that in mind, so today I'm partners with, let's say, 4 physicians, for example, and when is it the time to review? Especially like in someone that just brand new opened up a shop, opened up a practice, or and conversely in a small business that just opened up shop, for instance. When should that review happen along the way of the life cycle? Your lifetime of the business or the life cycle of the business, because obviously, like you said, certain situations change, and with that situation, you could be pretty good for let's say, for an example, 3 years, but then at the 4th year there's like a significant hiccup, for example. And right. So when should that be? Before the significant hiccup, or is that is there anything we can do at the significant hiccup to adjust that? And then so it's the when, right? It's kind of like when you carve out time and you say, I'm making this time today, I really need to do it, and I'm blocking my time, et cetera.
Yeah. So you want to try as best you can to plan for those significant hiccups, so to speak, because sometimes if that hiccup occurs, depending on the hiccup, it's too late. So, a hiccup just in terms of, if one of the owners dies, what happens, right? So think of it this way. Just keep a simple example of, not four. I'll get to that in a sec. The more owners there are, the more complex the issues become because everybody has a family, everybody has their own life going on. But just think of it this way: you and I are in business together. Um, God forbid you got hit by a bus. You would come, your family, your spouse, your family would come to me and say, hey, the business is worth 5 million. We own 50-50. Um, you know, pay it, buy us out. We want the $2.5 million that we need. Do I have $2.5 million laying around somewhere that I can just go to and get? Maybe I can go to a bank, but then on top of losing my partner, running the business and everything that involves, now I've got a payment of, I don't know, 10 grand a year for the next decade, right?
Right.
So So when should these be reviewed? I would say at a minimum on an annual basis. Obviously, when you start out, it's going from scratch, but it's not necessarily just a timeline. It's more of like you alluded to, life events. So if you've got four owners, those are four families. So what happens with maybe one of the owners has a baby, has a child. Everybody's life's different. Everything's going on in their lives, and you just want to make sure that um, those circumstances are kind of accounted for and thought about. And also, you want to make sure. Again, that's why I mentioned the valuation formula. Some people have these things in place, but it's been 7 years ago, and now the business is worth more than it was 7 years ago. Um, the families, there's a couple more kids involved, and it's just a little bit more complex. So you want to try and you don't have to examine this every single day, but I would say at least once a year, or when one of the owners has sort of a significant event kind of thing happen in their life that you haven't, you want to plan for the disability, the divorce, all those kinds of things. But for sometimes happy events, a child,
Sure.
like that. Or remember this buy-sell agreement. It's an agreement. It can be changed at any time, right? It's a living document. It's not like you set something in stone and you can never change it. You can change it as often as you like, obviously, as long as all the parties agree to the changes, right? And unfortunately,
Right.
what can happen is when you're starting out and there's not a lot of business value, I still would recommend the owners sit down and talk about this because it's going to be much easier when there's no value to talk about these things. Believe me,
Mm,
I've seen it. Even if you are best friends with your partner,
right.
life changes. So you're sitting there and you wouldn't necessarily have to plan for everything, but having that conversation sooner than later is desirable because if you don't, and it's flash forward 5 years and now there's some really good value in the business, it can become a different conversation. It can, there's just, when money's involved, sometimes people change. And, you just have to be aware of that. Better to start out and get this tightened up, some aspects of it tightened up right away. So
And the practicality of it, before I get to my third question, I will briefly touch on, is, the frequency, and I think just knowing that it's a living will and it's not a, hard and fast that this has got to be this, that you have the ability to change. And I think the other thing is, like you said, as my example, whether you're two or four, or more, is having to be able to still agree that this is still what direction we want to do, as we that our succession is going to be like.
mhm.
So I like that. I think that gives a little bit of a breather with all of the things that are busy and happening coming at you at once. It's a good thing to know that you have a flexibility to be able to do that. That said, what if I don't have one? If I don't have anything at all, that never even come across my mind. But and I just truly don't have one. So is that too late? Not too late. And then, what's your process, John? Like if I'm one, I'm Sharon. I have I'm coming to you and to say, what, I really don't have one. It hasn't even come through my mind.
Right.
And so what do I do? What do I do?
Sure. So if you don't have a plan in place, then you're not in control of anything, right? You're not. And remember, your secession strategy or exit strategy, it can happen completely out of your control, right? You have no control of it.
Right.
So how we try to help owners is just, so obviously this is a relationship that's developed over time. Many times, well, so we'll sit down with an owner or a physician and just get an understanding of the business. What are you trying to accomplish? How long have you been in business? How'd you get involved in this? What do you want to see? Have you thought about what happens when you hang up the shingle? What are you going to do? So in the beginning, a lot of these questions we're asking, it's more questions from us and listening, and it's really just trying to get the person or persons to, first of all, realize that they have an issue, they have a problem, they just haven't thought about it yet. So we'll take that feedback, and again, sometimes they may not know the answer, but we'll have some conversations, and then we'll come back to the people and say, well, based on what we told us in our experience, here's a framework. Here's sort of engagement. Here's things we see that are sort of good. Here's some areas we see that are, you have to address, or you've got some issues, etc. And then at that point, if they see value in continuing the dialogue and saying, hey, yeah, this, I hadn't thought about this. This does make sense to kind of keep this going. Then we can engage at some level, and then again, it's not a transaction. This is something we're going to be involved with for a period of time. Could be a long period of time, because sometimes things should be done immediately, and sometimes things are just you're aware of it,
Right.
but we don't have to do
Right.
that today. This is more priority to get this other thing in place versus what you're concerned about is important, but actually it's not a priority right now. So that's how that's typically how we work with folks. And again, it's just always remember, your secession is you can make the best plans possible, right? Which you should. Always have a plan B, because it doesn't always work out for different reasons in life. And make sure you have something in place, because something could happen this afternoon and completely out of your control. And you'll be forced into a strategy that may not be the one, or the one you wanted to have take place.
Right. And as the old saying goes, life does happen, and there are some things that is truly totally out of your control. And and as best planning as you can, in order to, like you said, protect the business. And also, if there's a growth in terms of your own legacy, that this is going to get continuance, over after you say it's an exit. So those things are important. I do want to ask you: is there an assessment that folks do take? Kind of like as part of your process to get to know them, and kind of what my situation is and things like that.
Sure. So my website, jcsfinancialsolutions.com, there's an area on the website that's devoted to business owners, and you'll find a number of different tools there. That one of those tools you mentioned, there's an assessment. So you can go on there, and it's going to take you 10 minutes, 15 minutes to fill out. You don't need your CPA. It's, have you thought of, when do you want to leave your business? Who do you want to leave it to? Have you done any kind of tax planning around that? So it's very high level kind of questions that you can answer really quickly. And then we can create a report for you that based on your answers, it's trying to prioritize from your perspective, and we can sit down and typically it can be a starting point where obviously these are concerns you have and they're valid concerns, but here's some other concerns that maybe you weren't aware of or weren't as prioritized, which really these should be addressed, before these. So it's yeah, I encourage people. Again, just take you 10 minutes out of your day, and it could get you started.
Okay, I'm gonna pop it in the chat, and then we'll wrap it up. Just give me one moment, folks. I'm gonna place that link, and you can certainly take a look at that. All right, it is now in the chat. John, thank you so much for this topic. Thank you for being our guest. I learned a lot, not just me, myself as a business owner, but to even kind of say, oh, let me take a pause and take a look and see, what my strategy would be when that time comes, and is it something that I need to do? But very important points. Remember, I will definitely remember the protect, grow, and exit. Those are key. I can remember in my head. At least have that and carve out 10 minutes.
The other thing I just would say, if you remember nothing else, you want to do it on your terms. And the three things most people are concerned about is when you want, for the money you need, to the people you know and trust. That ultimately is what we're trying to do.
Excellent. There we have it. I will certainly remember those. Again, John, thank you so much.
Thank you.
I hope everybody got our information is beneficial to you, and I will put it back in the comments again. How you can reach John and the assessment.
Great.
All right.
Thanks again.
Have a great week and
You
take care.
All right. Have a good day.